and share screen. Let's see, yeah. So we already started exception last week, is it? Let's go to this mode. Oh no, I cannot do that. Oh, okay, I can do this, yeah. So we already started, I remember we already discussed examples, exceptions, but we haven't discussed it architecturally. So here is a architecture level about all of the exceptions. And we already learned the inheritance, is it? So we know object, is it? So object is a root class for all of Java class, is it? And for the exception, we last class we see a lot is like the arithmetic exception, is it? And IO exception we also see it, is it? And so this is the hierarchy, is it? So from object, then we have throwable, is it? And under throwable, then we have two categories. We have arrow and we have exception, is it? And under exception, then you have class not found exception, IO exception, runtime exception, is it? Runtime exception. And under runtime exception is like the arithmetic exception that we already learned, is it? And we already used. And some other exception like null point, index out of bound, like for array, is it? If the array index out of its bounds, it can cause this kind of error, is it? And the illegal argument in our previous example, we also saw that, and many other exception class. So these are all exception class. So this picture just gave us the architecture level, okay, about all of the exceptions. And then let's see the next slide, if I will be, okay. So yeah, so then for this slides, let's see what's the difference, is it, between these two big categories, arrow and exception, okay. So under arrow, you have some linkage arrow, virtual machine arrow, and many more classes like over here it shows. So what is arrow? Is it arrow is as a system arrow generally thrown by Java virtual machine, okay, and is represented in the arrow class, okay. And the arrow class describe internal system arrow, okay. So generally speaking, this is out of your control, okay. Out of, when you write a program, it's very hard to predict like this kind of error, is it? But it says such error rarely occurs, okay. So generally speaking, it's out of our control, okay, out of our control. And the arithmetic exceptions, that illegal argument like those we learned, they belong under like the runtime exceptions. And runtime exception is subclass of exception, okay. And this type of, they are all under exception. Okay, and for exceptions, as it describes the error caused by the program, is it, and some external circumstances. So sometimes like the index out of bounds, is it, and arithmetic, then clearly from our examples, we can also see, is it, this just, when you write a program, you may forget to do some condition check, is it? So they are caused by some logical error, is it? Is it? So these are controllable, is it? So this kind of errors can be caught and handled by program, is it? And for arithmetic, index of null point, the listed here, is it? They also belong to runtime exception, is that when your program wrong, is that, and the error may occur, the exception may occur, is it? And if we do catch them, then it won't impact your program execution, is it? Your program can continue to run, is it, gracefully, is it? But for IO exception, it's a different story, is it? And we learned, we also see the example, is it? Even when you write your code, you need to handle it, because if you don't handle it, your program even cannot be compiled, is it? Okay, so that's two general category. And a runtime exception, I already explained, it's caused by programming errors, is it? So sometimes some errors that you didn't pay attention, is it? Okay, and this two type we also explained, is it? So here it says runtime error, runtime exception, and error. Those two category. Okay, those are two. Runtime exception is under exception. Under exception. Okay, so part of exception and the whole error, so those two big class and their subclasses is that they are unchecked exceptions. Is it? And so for like the IO exception, is it, and some other exception, they are called checked exception. Is it? For unchecked exception, it doesn't mandate you to catch. Is it? But for checked, it's mandate that you need to do the corresponding catch. So you need to handle it, okay, when you write your program. So that's a major difference between unchecked exception and checked exception, okay. Okay, and we already explained, is it like unchecked exception doesn't mandate us to catch the exception. And we already know this two big category, okay, runtime exception and error, they are under unchecked exception. And we can skip, yeah, please.
So what do you mean by catch? Like this is catched exception and this is not, like?
Let's go, okay, let's probably go back to our code to see, okay. Let me make sure this is a code, yeah. Let me get back to probably the, just get a quick review of the example, then that. So your question is about what's checked and unchecked, is it?
Yes.
Okay, okay. You remember Tuesday, is it? We discussed the divide, is it, the quotient? And in this case, you cannot just do directly divide.
Yes, mathematical exception.
So, yeah, we know that, is it? And then we have some method, is it, over here? This method just do regular if, is it? And this example, it throws exception, okay? And this just do regular if, is it? And this quotient 2, it throws exception. This throws exception. And if the divisor is 0, then it throws that arithmetic exception, is it? So that's called what? Quotient 2, okay. And then let's go back. Do you remember we comment out this part, is it? So because that over here, you call that method, is it? That method can throw exception. Is it throw exception? Throw exception, so you need to put this function call in a try block. Okay, so any Java function, if it throws exceptions, then you got to put it in a, you better put it, okay? It depends on if it's checked and unchecked exception, okay? But here, anyway, we put it in this corresponding try-catch block. Okay, you remember this method, it throws this arithmetic exception, is it? And this arithmetic exception because it can throw, so that's why you have this catch block. So in case when this statement wrong, is it when number 2 is 0, is it won't just terminate abnormally, is it? The exception will be caught by this catch block. So your program will still continue run gracefully. Okay.
So that means that this type of exception we can check. So it's checked against.
No, this arithmetic is unchecked. It is unchecked exception. Okay. So here, this try block, you can erase it. For this, for quotient 2, when you try to, you don't, it's not mandatory. You needed to put it in a try-catch block. But this example I'm trying to show is how to use the try-catch block. That's the point here, okay? To introduce try-catch block. But specific arithmetic exception, it is unchecked. Yeah, please.
I was just going to ask real quick, just for a small clarification. The checked unchecked, is that referring to at compile of the code?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in this case, if you after our class, you can also try, okay, at home. You cross out of this. You cross out this. Okay, you just keep this statement. And then you put number 2 there. Your program still run. If number 2 is 0, it just will throw that exception as automatically. Okay, so your program, of course, will be terminated. It will not continue run. Okay, but you can still run your program. Is it? So there is nothing to prevent the program to run, even though this quotient 2 method throws an exception. But because it throws unchecked exception, so even though you don't provide try-catch block, your program will still be able to run. Okay, it's just in this, it's just in this special case, then it will report that exception. Yeah, please.
So does that mean that Java does not check this arithmetic exception before it compiles the file?
Yeah, before compile.
So if we have a checked inspection, then we cannot compile the file because we have an error, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So what is the example of checked exception?
Check, yeah, let's go, hold on, okay, let me get, scroll down. You remember, and then quotient 2. Yeah, over here I explained that we have that part. If we don't do the try-catch block, it still works. And the quotient 3 is just a throw clause. It still works, okay? It doesn't mean you always need to have the throw. The get fluid. Okay, so for the IO exception. So arithmetic exception. It's called a runtime. It's a category of runtime exception. Okay, including also like when you write array, you have index out of bound, those kind, is it? And null point. Null point, is it illegal argument? You remember of those? Is it all those belong to runtime exception? So it has nothing to do with compile time, is it? But for IO exception, IO exception is what? It's checked exception. So for checked exception, we got to put it in a try-catch block, okay? Otherwise, it will have that squiggly line, is it? So for the, let's take a look. here we have that get fluid, is it? We have a file called fluid2, is it? Fluid2, and we over here it's a file not found, is it? File not found also belongs to the IO exception, is it? Let's take a look of a get fluid. So for this get fluid as a method, it throws that file not found, is it? It throws this file not found if the file doesn't exist. Is it? That's happened a lot, is it? Then you need to take care of it here, is it? And then in our, so where is that? Oh yeah, so let's get, you remember we demonstrated. So if I comment out this, and if I uncomment out this, did you see over here, it has that arrow report, is it? Over here, it has squiggly line, is it? And if you read it here, here it says unreported exception. It said must be caught or you declare to be thrown. So because over here, it didn't do anything for that get fluid because it throws, is it? So it won't let you compile, is it? So this is checked exception. Checked exception, okay.
Makes
so,
sense. Now it makes sense.
It makes sense, is it? Yeah. So that's a difference between checked and unchecked. But you see, if I uncomment this out, if I put this get fluid call within try block, and you have the corresponding catch block to catch whatever the exception it throws, then it works. Okay, then it's no complaint, is it? No complaint. Okay, then let's get back to take a look at this get fluid method, is it? So this get fluid throws that file not found exception. And this file not found exception itself, is it? So this exception is checked. Is checked exception.
So what does the keyword throws means?
This throw, you mean this throw?
Throw, yeah.
Yeah, what does it mean? It's just whenever this, because otherwise this anyway, it's also an instance. Is it because you have new? Is it because you have new? Is it? So this is an instance of a checked exception. Is it a checked exception? So anyway, so in Java or exception, you got to use this keyword throw to kind of generate it and let your program throw this exception. And so that when you have the corresponding try catch block, because you catch an exception, is it? You catch some exception. And how do you catch? It's somewhere here throw. Is it somewhere here throws? So that exception throw it will be caught by the caught block. Because if you don't have this, then over here it doesn't know where, how to catch it. Is it? So this is just a flow. Okay, so try, catch, and throw. So throw is in some other method, is it? So throw, you define the exception. So you throw an exception in a method. So this is in a method. In a method, is it? It's throws. And then you put that method in the try block. Is it? So when you run that method in some scenario, some exception may be created. Is it? Once that exception is created, so here it throw it. Is it throw it so that the following statement won't be executed, and then it will go to the catch block. So that's the whole flow. Okay, so here you have some method, basically. Okay, so that method throw exception. Throw exception, is it? And then you have this method be invoked in a try block. So this will happen in another method. Is it in another method? Is it? And in the other method, you call this method, so it may throw the exception, then exception be caught. Does this make sense?
Yes, now it makes sense. So we basically use this throw new to send it. So we have a try catch block, and then we throw exception inside of it, so we can figure out if we have error or no.
Yeah, basically. Okay. So, but to just be careful here is this file not found exception is a checked. So if you throw this checked exception, then go back to where is it? Yeah, go back to here. Is it? Then you got to put it in a try catch block. Okay. Otherwise, if you just do like arithmetic exception or index out of bound exception, those unchecked, that will be wrong. Your program won't be compiled. Okay. So you do need to have this to catch it. Okay, so that's this case. Then let's say, for the checked exception, it doesn't mean that whatever the method involves check exception, you must throw it. That's not mandatory. Okay, so let's take a look. The second version of the get fluid. Okay. So here we have the second version of get fluid, is it? So it's pretty similar. It's going to do file handling, is it? So over here, so that exception basically is because of the file. Okay, so this is your file name. File name, is it? If the file doesn't exist, if you do new file, that will cause this file not found exception. Okay, so this file found basically it's because of the file. Okay, the file class. The file class. So because this exception is a checked exception, is it? So if you handle it inside this function with a try catch block, then you don't need to throw. Okay, so in this case, then no need to throw because you already take care of it. Is it? So anyway, you must have some try catch block to handle the file, to handle checked exception. Is it? It's either inside this function or in the other function when you call it, it will throw exception. Is it? So no matter what, you need to have a try catch block to handle it. Okay, so that's the point. Okay, so over here it can cause the file not found exception. If file does exist, and over here scanner previously we also learned, is it? At that time you get it from a keyboard, is it? But over here we also see you can also do input with a scanner with a file. Okay, with a file. So it's quite it covers quite a broad resource, is it? And after you do this, and you can do next line, next integer, is it? Next float, next character, is it? To read whatever, is it? This just read the whole line, is it? And then it's do split, is it? Get each individual word, and then convert the fourth one to an integer and return it, as a return it. So that's what this get fruit method does. And over here, we also need to be careful with the file is, here it's kind of your open file. Is it? And then do some processing. Is it? Generally speaking, after you finish use the file, you also need to close it. Okay, so remember to also close file. Okay, so basically it's a release resource. Release the resource. You don't want to hold, not hold resource anymore. Is it by just your application so that other application can also access it? Is it? So that's what happened in this finally block. So finally block, then you do, we have another try catch block. Is it? Here it shows. So here we also see try catch block. Is it try catch block? So if the contents is not null, is it? So you do open the file, is it? And you do some processing, is it? And you need to close the resource. Okay, close the resource. Otherwise, you see, you throw what? You throw an IO exception, is it? So if the contents is null, then you throw an IO exception, is it? And that IO exception, this is also checked exception. So it will be caught by this IO exception, is it? And you can output some information about this exception, say, okay, you cannot close this file, is it? And whatever the exceptions message is, okay? So generally speaking, whenever we deal with file, also remember to close it after you don't use it anymore. Okay, so this is the get fruit 2. And then next, let's see, so get fruit 2. So within get fruit, you already use the try catch block, is it? So that's why over here, you don't need to do the try catch block anymore. Okay, because that checked exception already handled by try catch block. Okay. So that's the other option. And we have another option to deal with checked exception. In this specific case is, but this only applies to generally to, we call it resource, okay. We can also use, we call it try with resource block. Okay, so what is this? So let's take a look, the third version of our get fruit file. Method. Okay, in this case, if you take a look, the get fruit, is it, and the file name, is it? If you take a look here, we still have try catch, is it still catch file not found exception, is it? But did you see the weird thing is this part? Is it? Previously, we don't have anything, is it? Generally, you have try, followed by what? Curly brackets. Is it within it? You have statements. Is it statements? Is it? This is where it also has parentheses here. Is it? And within the parentheses, you do what? You open file. Is it? Open file is what? Basically, it's try to open resource as far as a resource. It's some kind of resource. Is it you're trying to use the resource. If you try to use, you need to make sure the resource is accessible. Is it? It's accessible. So this we call it try with resource block. It's pretty similar as try catch, is it? But you have a parenthesis. Within the parenthesis, you do some file handling. Okay, file handling. In this case is, okay, you create a new file, okay, with a specified file name. And then I can do scanner, is it? And this, generally speaking, the file not found exception is caught by over here, is it? So if the exception happens, then it will be still caught by this catch block, is it? It's just over here, you put this in the try catch or in the try with resource block, and then also in this case, we didn't handle close cases, is it? We didn't handle that close cases. That's because the try with resource block, it does the auto closable. Okay, auto closable. So if everything works fine, is it? When you reach the end of the try block, the resource will automatically be closed. So the resource will automatically be released back to the system. Okay, so that you don't need to manually do that, what we did before, call the close. Okay, so that's the nice thing for the try with resource block. Okay, a lot of time when you have file handling, anyway, so something deal with resource, you can just use this try with resource block. Okay, so that's the idea about the other option, is it? And over here, yeah. So with that case, you see, you just call the function. You don't need to worry about try catch block anymore. Okay, so that's the other case. And the last case here, here it says multiple catch cases. Okay, still get through it. So let's take a look. The last one. So here we have that get through it, the other option, is it? So over here, did you see? We use the try with resource block, is it? But if you take a look, we have multiple catch statement, is it? We have multiple catch statement. So it depends, this exception, is it? So the exception, if it's a file not found, okay, it will go to this block. If it is IO exception, it will go to this block. You may also have some number formatting exception, then it can go to this block. So this just shows the try catch block, you can have multiple catch. Okay, whenever you have try. So even with this general try catch, it's the same thing, okay? So you can have multiple catch so that the different category of exception, so all exception can be caught. Okay, so this is so that you won't miss any exception. So you can list all possible exceptions. So that's what multiple catch block. And that's all for this example, okay? And next, let's take a look. Let's go to the third example first. It's called Java exception example 3, okay, on our course website. So let's take a look at this exception. So for this exception, what we first do is we have some image file, okay, and I stored in a folder called the image, and this image is under my project folder. Okay, later I'm going to show. So the very first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a file object created, is it? So the logic file object associated with this physical file, okay? If the file exists, is it? So that's why, because if the file doesn't exist, you will have the exception. is it? You will have the exception, is it? And over here it shows, is it? So if the file doesn't exist, is it? Then you can also throw this exception, is it? Through this exception, file not found exception, file not found exception can be caught by this catch block, is it? By catch block, so that all of this statement then won't be wrong, is it? But if no exception thrown, then all of this statement will be executed, is it? So in this case, so here it just shows with this file class, it provides a lot of file property check. So you want to know if a file exists, how many bytes in this file, so file size, is the file readable, writable, is it a folder, is it directory, or is it just a file, and is it the absolute path, is the file hidden, and we get to the absolute path. This is not an absolute path, okay? This is just a relative path regarding your directory. And you can also get when the file last modified. So a lot of file related properties, you can get it from this file class. Okay, that's regarding file. And over here, how do we create a file instance? Is previously in our previous example, we also showed, is it? So you associate some physical file, is it? This is physical file, and this is a file object, is file instance. So once this, if the file exists, is it? Then it will do something here. Here I'm trying to read the file. So let's take a look. And we already understand here is a try catch block. We do need it, is it? Because this may throw this file not found exception, okay? And then let's take a look, read file. So for this read file, it throws that file not found exception, is it? And if file exists, we do scanner, is it? And then we just do, with the scanner, then you can read, is it either line by line or word by word, is it, or integer, depends on your file formatting, is it? So here it's going to do line by line read, it just do has next line and the next line, is it? You get each line through the next line. And then for this read file, it's pretty simple. You just try to read it. Okay, then you just do the print line. Okay, so this is what this read from file does. And then let's take a look. The second read from file, we have another function. Okay, it's pretty similar, is that you deal with a file, and then it may cause the file not found exception. Okay. And we still do scanner, is it? We scan this time, you do the has next, is it? And you can do each individual. So for the next, it gets a string. Okay, for all of the next, you get string. If you want to get next integer, then you just do next integer. Okay, because that's the format of the file, of our file. Okay, and you can also see after we use it, we always close the file, is it? Okay, that's this read from file 2. Then let's get back, is it? So we also have read from file 2, is it? So that's the second file. And I'm going to show you the files. And the third one is you can also write something to a file. Is it the same thing? You create the file object, is it? And over here, we have another function called write to file. So let's take a look over here, is it? So here we have that write to file. So similar, is it? And if the file exists, so over here, it's we are going to, so if the file is doesn't exist, then we are going to create the file, okay? But if the file already exists, then we are not going to write anything. We're just going to return. Okay, so that's what this function does. So to write to file, you cannot use scanner. Okay, so here we call it print write. Okay, print write. Print write, it's pretty similar as what we use as system.out. Okay. You can also do formatted output, okay? So you associate the physical file with this print file object. So we create a printer writer object here. Once this object you create, you can do print. So this is just like, so how you use system.out.print, you can use it exact same way. And you can also do print line, So that you add the end of line symbol, okay? Otherwise it won't automatically generate line, okay? So you need to do this print line. And after you finish, you can close it. So this is regarding write to a file. And the similar thing is that with this print writer, be careful, you also need to have the IO exception because the file may not be able to be created. In that case, okay, then you just catch the IO exception, okay. So that's regarding the write to file. Where is that? Write to file. Okay, over here. So inside the file, we already handled the try catch, the exception. And then let's take a quick look of the file. Contact, Yeah, let's see. We can do the share screen. Okay, so that's the contact file. As you see, it's line by line. With each line, you have name, you have city, you have email address, and then you have age. That's how we do. When you do scanner, you do next, next, next. So all of those you get through, we get through with the next call, And this is through that next int call. If you can also, we can also do the next line. Then that case is you get the whole line. Okay, the whole line, okay. Or you get each individual word, because, oh, that's not this file, shouldn't use this file, should be the other file, okay. Because it's split by space. Okay, so let's, yeah, it should be this file, I'm sorry. It should be this file, okay, not colon. Because the scanner, if we do next, it uses space, So over here, you see, between each word, we have the space. So it will automatically use space to get whatever the next word is. And this is that next integer. This is similar as, so the next, similar as a string, For string, you can call the split. If you don't specify, by default is use space, to do tokenization. So similar here, it's next is to get the next token. The token, token basically here is string. Okay, string and separated by space, Or you do next integer, okay. Okay, so that's the general idea about exception. So regarding all the exception, we are almost completed. And I'm going to